We welcome you today as we celebrate this feast of Holy English Martyrs, John Fisher and Thomas More. And today I will not really be talking about the first reading at all, which is, unusual for me. I usually mention that first. We'll be talking about the martyrs. John Fisher was born in England in 1469, all right? And he was ordained a priest and became an educator for the royal family, for Prince Henry, who became King Henry VIII. In 1504, John Fisher was made Bishop of Rochester and Chancellor at Cambridge University. And John Fisher paid great attention to the poor. He was very concerned for them, a man of penance and great love for those he served, and also wrote 8 books against heresies. So he was definitely on that front. And during this whole time, King Henry VIII and John Fisher were friends. They got along very well. But as those of you who are fans of history probably are aware, when Henry VIII claimed that his marriage to Catherine, I think that was Catherine of Aragon, his brother's, when he claimed that his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, was not valid, and Henry had become interested in Anne Boleyn instead. And so Henry VIII sought a divorce and wanted support from Bishop Fisher. Bishop Fisher refused to sign a decree authorizing this divorce. And you have to understand that this is before not the Reformation, this is before, again, that the church splits off from England. And although every other bishop in England signed a letter authorizing this divorce, John Fisher did not. And so that's a kind of a thing to note. And 6 months later, Henry VIII, who had had enough of being slowed down here, had something called the Oath of Supremacy. The Oath of Supremacy written that essentially made him supreme head of the Catholic Church in England. And so at this point, in his mind, leadership over the church in England shifted from Rome with the Holy Father to himself, and of course, that was not valid. That was not something that actually changed anything. And as you can imagine, Bishop Fisher refused to sign such a blasphemous document. So John Fisher was put in prison in 1534 on charges of high treason, and without a trial, after 14 months of being in jail, was condemned to death by beheading. And this brings us to Thomas More, who was born in 1477. He thought about the priesthood and ultimately made the decision to pursue law school. He had 3 daughters, a son, later on marrying and having these children. He is known, of course, as a brilliant and effective lawyer, and someone who was very charming, someone who was a very witty person. And he's also known for his writings, such as his book Utopia. So you can actually read Thomas More's writings, and you may wish to. They're interesting. In this case, it's a little bit like John Fisher's story, that he got along very well with the king, but Thomas had actually reached a very high level in the English government, and Henry wanted his approval of his marriage and divorce proceedings. Thomas refused. And so Thomas, like John Fisher, refused to sign the Oath of Supremacy that recognized Henry as the sole leader of the church in England. And at this point, Thomas resigned and left to live with his family. And unfortunately, that would be a brief respite from governmental affairs. he was arrested and detained in the Tower of London. He was tortured at one point, and eventually he was executed as was John Fisher. When he was brought out before the crowd, Thomas More said something that has remained an expression of his, engraved in stone, so to speak. He said, "I die the king's good servant, but God's first." So Thomas More, it's important to understand that with both Thomas More and Bishop Fisher, they were not people that were schizophrenic, that were seeking to be martyred. Okay, that is very clear from their stories. Especially Thomas More had children, and neither of them wanted to lose their lives. This was not a mental health situation or kind of a fanaticism, but they authentically loved the governments they served and the church they served, obviously in the case of Fisher. However, as Thomas More said, he died the king's good servant. He maintained that he was being loyal to the end to the best interest of the crown, but God's first. And I do think, as someone reminded me when I was sharing about this, that I was going to talk about, these saints yesterday, she made a very good point that this is something that our Catholic politicians should be thinking about, because our Catholic politicians must be servants of God first, and in a secondary way, loyal to the government of the United States, because the interests of our country are always best taken care of by being loyal to God first. And there should not be a conflict there. Saints John Fisher and Thomas More, pray for us.